Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Ladar Gavelazian, coming up in today's newscast. Israelis face another car-ramming terrorist attack in Judea and Samaria. The Palestinian terrorists shot and killed by security forces. After intense negotiations, Likud and Religious Zionism parties are reportedly close to finalizing an agreement. Is a new right-wing government on the horizon? And a new selfie from the Artemis 1 crew in space featuring the Israeli flag and Israeli tech. We open with another terrorist attack. This morning, a Palestinian driver intentionally rammed his car into an Israeli woman on Road 60 at the Migron Kochav Yaakov intersection in Judea and Samaria. An ambulance arrived quickly on the scene and rushed the 20-year-old victim to Shaarei Tzedek Hospital in Jerusalem. She's undergoing treatment for head injuries and remains in serious condition. The driver managed to flee the scene, but police and security forces were quick to respond. After a chase in heavy traffic, the driver was shot and killed by officers. The Army conducted searches in the area to determine whether other threats remain. And speaking of terror, in light of Tehran's continued threats against the West, Washington and Jerusalem now launching one of the largest military drills they've ever conducted together. ILTV's Aaron Porras reporting.
Israeli and American air forces joining up in the sky above the Mediterranean Sea and Israel for a landmark drill between Tuesday and Thursday, and the mission of this massive drill to simulate an offensive strike against Iran's nuclear program. As such, the exercise will include fighter jets and refueling jets from both air forces. Further, the simulation is likely to include shared intelligence coordinations through CENTCOM. IDF Chief of Staff Lieutenant General Kochavi having just returned from Washington, where he met with the senior Joint Chiefs of Staff and the CENTCOM commanders. And this drill similarly following several IDF and CENTCOM simulations, as well as operational missions over the past year. Jerusalem and D.C. having signed an agreement that outlines U.S. assistance to Israel in times of war.
After weeks of grueling negotiations and pressure from coalition partners, Religious Zionism Party Chair Bezalel Smotrich and Likud head Benjamin Netanyahu reporting a breakthrough in talks overnight. The two parties saying that they've come to terms on nearly all major issues between them and that the final details will likely be finalized over the next 24 to 48 hours. In the meantime, among the agreements, Smotrich's party saying they've agreed to Netanyahu's request to immediately appoint a temporary Knesset speaker in order to introduce and pass the controversial court override bill, and also to allow Shas Chair Aryeh Deri to serve as a minister. In any case, it seems that a new and stable right-wing coalition is indeed on the horizon to be sworn in the coming weeks. And so joining us now with more on the new coalition that is taking shape and more is now former member of Knesset for the Meretz Party, Mossi Raz. Mossi, always a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you,
so let's talk about the current coalition talks. As we mentioned in the last 24 hours, there seems to have been some sort of breakthrough. What are your thoughts on the new government that's taking shape?
I'm not happy with this government. I did not vote for this government, and half of the Israelis who went to vote did not vote for this government. They got 50%, more or less. And it seems that this is the most extreme government in the history of Israel. I believe even Netanyahu himself is not happy about this government. The far right is, and the ultra-Orthodox are very powerful. Netanyahu is not far right, and he is not ultra-Orthodox. And many of the things that they demand, he is not supporting by himself. I'm sure that he wanted center parties to join him. And in the 15 years that he was prime minister, he always had with him center parties, sometimes even center-left parties, Labour. And this now he has to manage alone with all these extreme people. It's going to be very difficult even for him. So it's going to be difficult for me too. As part of what they demand is to confront most of the Jews in the world, when they don't want to recognize, for example.
Well, I want to get to the specifics in a minute, but I mean, You know, you mentioned this is the most, I think, far-right government in Israel's history, and yet the people did vote for it. You mentioned, you know, 50%, a little bit more than 50%, I would say, especially, for example, with Bezalel Smotrich, Itamar Ben-Gvir receiving, you know, becoming the third largest party in the Knesset before they split. Do you see this sort of as a failure of the left, you know, and specifically with Meretz that didn't pass the electoral threshold? You know, is the Israeli public moving to the right?
I think that, you know, specifically with Meretz, that we did not make it through the threshold, 3.25%. It happened to us in the past, but the threshold was not that high in the past. And specific for the left, we got 49.5 or 0.6%. It's exactly like we got in 1992 and most of the years in the last 3 decades. But because of technical issues, the thresholds and other things, we didn't have the majority. Yes, the left has problems here, everywhere. Social democracy is not that popular anymore. If we talk about the families in Israel, you know, if you vote for the right wing, probably you have a larger family, and then the young generation is way more supportive to the right wing. But in spite of all that, we are still 50%.
Now, let's talk about, you know, this current coalition that seems to be taking shape. It hasn't formed yet, and yet it has received, you know, a lot of criticism from both outside and within Israel over its intended policies. We can start, for example, with, you know, Defense Minister Benny Gantz, who recently said that Ben-Gvir's appointment as National Security Minister will harm Israel's security. What are your thoughts on that?
You know, it's not a revolution here, yes, because it was in a democratic way, but this is a revolutionary change in Israel. If you take somebody who was a terrorist, he was charged in court a few times as supporting terror organization, that the Israeli army didn't want to recruit because of his past. And now he's going to be a minister in charge of security, of national security. This is a real change in Israel that we could not expect even 1 year ago. So it's not only the fact that it's right-wing and far-right. It's a real change that, and of course, a person like Gantz, and like myself even, but who is the defense minister, was the chief of staff, who did not even thought that there is a reason to take a person like Ben-Gvir to the army. And now we see him actually not replaced him, but going into the cabinet, and Gantz is going to be out of the cabinet.
But it seems that, you know, the Israeli public has overwhelmingly said that they need more of a firm hand against terrorism. You know, we're seeing constant terrorist attacks. We saw just one today.
Yes,
perhaps this is the way that Israel needs to go.
Yeah, I think, no, it's not the way Israel needs to go, but yes, this is the results of the elections. It's not that the left is so weak, it's that the far right is so powerful. They got 11% compared to, I think, 5% a year ago and a year and a half ago. And yes, Israelis want to see, and it's natural. I think in all the history of the world, nations always supported wars.
And I want to talk also about, you know, the very controversial override bill, as it's being called, which critics are saying will erode democracy by limiting the powers of the courts. I just want to hear your thoughts on this bill. Clearly, you're against it, but, you know, what are your thoughts on this?
Of course, I'm against it. I think that it comes from a narrow thinking about democracy as a system that it's only about majority and minority, not about human rights, not about constitutional values, not about anything else.
All right. Well, Mossi Raz, former member of Knesset for the Meretz Party, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us and provide your thoughts on the new coalition. And moving on, the Israel Defense Forces has released a summary of its ongoing operation Breaking the Wave against terrorist activities in Judea and Samaria. ILTV's Aaron Porras with the details.
Over 500 terrorist attacks thwarted and some 3,000 Palestinian terror suspects arrested to date as part of the Israel Defense Forces Operation Breaking the Wave, which has seen thousands of troops conducting near nightly raids in Judea and Samaria to prevent terror attacks against Israeli civilians. Additionally, some 250 illegal weapons and arms confiscated, and more than 2.7 million shekels of money used to fund terror has been seized. Operation Breaking the Wave was launched in late March following a series of deadly terror attacks against Israelis that left 20 people dead. Israeli security forces, including the IDF, the Israel Security Agency, or Shin Bet, and the Israel Police, have been collaborating on the counter-terror operation. According to the IDF, this past year saw a significant increase in terrorism, with 281 attacks or attempted attacks against Israelis, civilians, and soldiers in the West Bank. The IDF also reporting a major increase in overall violent incidents by Palestinians, such as throwing stones and rioting. And yet the IDF saying that Operation Wavebreaker has also been one of the deadliest in recent years, with over 130 Palestinians killed, though the IDF saying that this is due largely to the gunfire directed towards Israeli troops during these nightly raids, in which soldiers are forced to respond with gunfire, often killing the terrorists. The IDF also noting that it is facing a new generation of terror attacks, as Palestinian youth now have access and are exposed to online forums, social media incitement, and local terror campaigns, turning the traditional, carefully planned institutional terror attacks into those of freelance attacks conducted by lone operatives and youth with the means to carry out small but deadly attacks. And so, despite the successes of the ongoing Operation Breaking the Wave, it seems that there is still no end in sight, as just today, Israelis saw yet another terror attack in Judea and Samaria.
And in related news, the United Nations Security Council met in New York to discuss the rise in violence between Israel and the Palestinians. The UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East Peace Process, Tow Wennesland, told the world body that the crisis has reached a boiling point. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz has more.
The special UN envoy told the Security Council that 2022 has been the most violent in Israel and the territories in many years, causing many civilian casualties with no solution in sight.
And the violence must stop. This surge of violence in the occupied Palestinian territory is taking place in the context of stalled peace process and entrenched occupation.
The special envoy all but admitted that the Oslo peace process is dead.
The optimism, hope, and vocal support for a negotiated political solution that were so palpable when the peace process began have now dimmed.
The U.S. ambassador to the UN lashed out at the world body, saying that its one-sided criticism of Israel was part of the problem.
Unfortunately, most UN actions related to Israelis and Palestinians are not designed to advance direct negotiations, let alone achieve peace. They're only intended to denigrate Israel. Indeed, the UN system is replete with anti-Israel actions and bodies, including biased and disproportionate resolutions against Israel across the UN system.
Both the U.S. and British ambassadors sharply condemned recent Palestinian terror attacks in Jerusalem.
Since the 14th of November, 4 Israelis have lost their lives in terror attacks in the city of Ariel and in Jerusalem, including a 16-year-old. There's no justification for this violence.
The violence is continuing, and in the assessment of the UN envoy, the security situation in Israel and the territories will get worse before getting better.
And moving on, Sheba Medical Center is ranked one of the top hospitals not only in Israel but in the world, in part due to its use of cutting-edge technology in medical care. And now the hospital embarking on a special campaign for advanced baby robotic simulators, all to improve care and help save the lives of babies. More in the following report. Sheba Medical Center in Israel is acclaimed as a pioneer in medical simulation, using advanced robotic patients to train staff. But in order to train doctors and nurses on the treatment of babies, the hospital has launched a campaign to buy a SimBaby robotic simulator. Medical staff from around Israel train at Sheba's Mesil Simulation Center. Despite having some of the most advanced adult-sized simulation equipment and systems in the world, the facility lacks baby-sized monitors. Simulation on babies' bodies is all the more important because the margin of error is very small. Sheba's Children's Hospital has now launched a campaign to buy a long-needed baby-sized simulator robot.
One of the most amazing gifts we can give someone is to give them the experience and training to save a life. By helping Shiva's Safra Children's Hospital acquire this baby simulator, we will be training hundreds or thousands of medical personnel to save an absolutely uncounted number of lives of babies and children in Israel.
American Friends of Sheba Medical Center are running a special fundraising campaign to raise $86,000 to purchase the Sim Baby simulator for Sheba. Sim Baby can cry and grunt, it opens its eyes and blinks at different rates, and its pupils react to light. It breathes on its own with audible breath and heart sounds, a pulse, and points where its skin reacts to pressure. Sim Baby can simulate cardiac, respiratory, and even neurological emergencies by changing the robotic baby's level of consciousness, arm movements, eye opening, and pupil reactions. It gives staff the skills that will help save babies' lives. It allows trainers and professors to monitor how well the procedures are being followed, allowing feedback in real time. Israel's biggest and best medical center needs support from friends in Israel and around the world to help Sheba to maintain its standards of excellence. Such an important campaign to save the lives of babies. If you want to help, you can by visiting the link on the screen below. And now, in a shocking revelation in 2019, the world learning of an international forced organ harvesting market in China. And today, it seems the practice still ongoing. So a group of Israeli rabbis now calling on Israel to take action against the perpetrators of this horrific crime, the Chinese Communist Party. ILTV's Aaron Porras reporting.
From the erasure of history and cultures to forced labor internment and so-called re-education camps, the Chinese Communist Party now outdoing even its own previous crimes against humanity, with a London tribunal revealing in 2019 a $1 billion per year industry of forceful organ harvesting and trade, which continues to this day. The International Court of Inquiry reporting some 1.5 million detainees in Chinese prison camps, many of whom are being murdered every year so that their organs can be harvested and traded for transplant. In fact, in its published conclusion, the tribunal alleging that forced organ harvesting has been committed for years throughout China on a significant scale, and that the practice is of unmatched wickedness on a death-for-death basis with the killings of mass crimes committed in the last century. And this especially as the victims almost entirely consisting of political dissidents and ethnic minorities like the Tibetans, the Uyghur Muslims, and practitioners of Falun Gong, a spiritual discipline that China banned in the 90s as, quote, an evil cult. Further, witnesses even testifying that in many cases, surgeons were forced to extract organs from living patients who resisted the operation but were too weak to succeed. In light of this evil, then, a consortium of 26 rabbis in Israel drawing on the Jews' victimizations themselves at the hands of a murderous regime in calling for Israel to speak out against Beijing. In an open letter to Israel's incoming government, the undersigned asking Jerusalem to seriously examine the continuation of cooperation with the Chinese regime in a number of critical areas until China can prove beyond a doubt that these actions have ceased. And among the partnerships mentioned, Israel asked to stop the cooperation in security, including police training, to stop the transfer of Israeli technology that could endanger the Chinese people, and the prohibition by law of any sharing between Israel and China on the issue of organ transplants and other medical issues that could be used to harm the citizens of China or support the perpetrators of these crimes, even indirectly. Time will tell if the new coalition will indeed heed the call to seek justice for those suffering under these horrific crimes at the hands of the communist Chinese government.
Joining us now with more on this story is Tal Babich, human rights activist. Thank you for joining us. So, we've just heard the claims, the findings of the London Tribunal. What, very shocking, very saddening. What more can you tell us about this?
Yes, it's very, very shocking information. It's hard to believe for many people. But unfortunately, many researchers and many groups already know that China is doing this, and they're doing this for a long time, probably since 20 years or even more than 20 years already, and in very large scale. Unfortunately, because China has very, very big censorship, it's very hard to know what's going on, but the numbers are huge and the methods are very terrible. They're doing this from live people, almost without any
anesthesia.
Yes, very terrible. something very, very brutal, and they're doing this for young, innocent people, not for criminals, for innocent people, especially for Falun Gong practitioners, and recently also for Uyghur minority.
You know, and now a group of rabbis has called on the Israeli government, you know, to halt or to limit cooperation with China. How likely is it that the Israeli government will call out the Chinese government on this?
Actually, I'm not so optimistic that it will happen immediately, but I hope it will be another step in the right direction, because in my view, it's not correct for Jewish state, for our people that said never again, not long time ago, after the Holocaust. Now, some experts even say that 3 Holocausts are going on in China against Falun Gong, against Uyghur people, and against Tibet minorities, and even Mongolian people. Many atrocities. So it's the right step, and hopefully one day it will happen, but let's see. We're just trying to do something.
And has there been a response from other countries in the world, aside from Israel?
Actually, there is a response. It's still not enough, in my opinion. But recently, European Parliament discussed this very seriously, and they issued official condemnation to Chinese regime, and of course, USA trying to do something. And also, there are some organizations that medical organizations that they try to limit cooperation and to raise awareness. There is some activity, but yes, more is needful to really bring a change.
Mm-hmm. And you know, who are the rabbis that were involved with this letter to the government?
It's 26 rabbis. Actually, all of them are from religious Zionism, not the Orthodox. But actually, I couldn't reach the Orthodox rabbis. I contacted also those religious Zionism rabbis. And there are very different people. For example, the former minister, Rabbi Michael Malkior, who was the head of the Meimad, like the left wing of the movement. And from another point of view, there are rabbis like Aviner, and even rabbis from the Hebron area, like very different rabbis, but all together in this humanistic aspect, they came together. It's something that like different people of different views can support it after they understand what's going on. Many people just don't know.
All right, well, you've brought this issue to light. A new coalition forming. We'll see if they address this issue. Tal Babich, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you.
And the incredible deep space mission dubbed Artemis 1 launching fewer than 2 weeks ago. And now, amid its orbit around the moon, early photos of the crew showing the mannequins sporting German, American, and Israeli flags. Zohar and Helga, as the mannequins are named, seen sporting the AstroRad radiation protection vest developed by the Israel STEMRAD company. The vest being tested in real-life conditions for whether or not they can protect against dangerous radiation in space. And, if successful, the experiment could soon lead the way for renewing manned visits to the moon, as well as contribute to studies on the effects of long-term space travel on humans. In the meantime, the picture is also giving way to a comical exchange on social media between NASA, the German Space Agency, the Israel Space Agency, and Space IL. The exchange including a cartoon selfie of the Artemis crew with the moon in the background, and then Space IL sending a selfie of its own from the first Bereshit lander, which crashed on the moon, saying, "We hope you reserve us a parking spot. We'll be on our way soon." And now, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight, the forecast calling for partly cloudy skies, scattered showers, and cooler temperatures with an average low of 11 degrees Celsius or 53 Fahrenheit. And then tomorrow, a mix of clear and partly cloudy skies overhead with top temperatures reaching 22 Celsius or 73 degrees Fahrenheit. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channels on YouTube, Facebook, and Telegram, and subscribe to our ILTV newsletter. I'm Madar Gavelazi. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.